Last month we were cleaning out Opal's root cellar. Opal is my mother-in-law. She turned 87 this past February. She's been on this land longer than most of the trees in the back field. We were sorting through her shelves, moving things around, making space, when my husband Earl reached behind a crate of old canning rings and pulled out a jar. The lid was old-style zinc with a rubber gasket. The label on the side, written in Opal's hand, said chicken. The date said 1958. We stood there looking at it for a long minute. Then we brought it inside. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened. I didn't open that jar because I was trying to do something dramatic. I didn't open it for a video. I opened it because I knew what Opal knew. I understood what was in that jar. Not just the chicken, the science, the method. The reason a jar sealed correctly under pressure in 1958 is still a sealed jar in 2025. That's what this video is about. That jar, that science, and Opal. If you don't already follow this channel, now is a good time to subscribe. We talk about real preservation here. Pressure canning, root cellars, long-term food storage. Not trends, not survival fantasy, the actual work. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Opal grew up during the Depression. She was born in 1938 in eastern Kentucky. She learned to can before she could drive. Her mother taught her, and her mother's mother taught her mother. There was no question of whether you preserved food. There was only the question of how much and when. Opal didn't can because she was afraid of the future. She canned because she had a garden, and she refused to let anything from that garden go to waste. That's a different motivation than most people think about today. It wasn't fear. It was thrift. It was respect for the work that went into growing something. That jar of chicken from 1958 wasn't a survival stockpile. It was extra. She canned more than she needed one year, ran the shelves deep, and that jar never got pulled to the front. Decades passed. She forgot about it. We almost moved it to the trash without looking. I'm glad Earl stopped and read the label. Now let me tell you what we did. We brought the jar to the kitchen counter. I looked at the lid first. With old zinc lids and rubber gaskets, you check for seal by pressing the center. There was no flex at all. Solid. That told me the vacuum was intact. A lid that flexes, pops up when you push it, pops back down, is a failed seal. You throw that one out. This lid didn't move. Then I looked at the jar itself. No cracks, no chips at the rim. The seal was clean. No discoloration on the glass, no swelling, no residue on the outside that would suggest any leakage ever occurred. I smelled around the rim of the lid before I broke the seal. I know that sounds like extra caution. It is extra caution. It's also what you should always do. Off odor before you open is a serious warning sign. There was no off odor. There was the faint smell of old rubber from the gasket. That's normal for zinc lids of that era, nothing else. Then I broke the seal. The lid came off with a soft hiss. That hiss matters. It's the sound of the vacuum releasing. If there's no vacuum, there's no hiss. No hiss means the seal failed at some point. There was a clear hiss on Opal's jar. The chicken inside was pale. Canned chicken always is. Pressure canning cooks the meat fully during processing, and it doesn't brown because there's no Maillard reaction happening under those conditions. The broth in the jar was clear. No cloudiness, no off color. I checked the texture with a fork before anyone ate. The meat separated cleanly, normal for properly canned chicken. We heated it, we ate it, it was fine. It tasted like chicken that had been canned a long time ago. Mild, soft, but completely safe. Now I'm going to tell you why it was safe. And I want you to pay attention here, because this is the part that matters most. The enemy of canned low-acid food is a bacterium called Clostridium botulinum. Most people have heard of it because it produces botulinum toxin, which causes botulism. What most people don't fully understand is the biology of this organism and why pressure canning specifically defeats it. Clostridium botulinum is an anaerobe. It grows and produces toxin in low oxygen, low acid environments. A sealed jar of chicken is exactly that environment, which means if you don't process it correctly, you create the perfect conditions for it to thrive. The problem isn't the active bacteria. You can kill active Clostridium botulinum at boiling temperature, 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The problem is the spores. Clostridium botulinum produces heat-resistant spores. These spores can survive boiling water. They can sit through 212 degrees for hours and survive. When the jar cools and conditions are right, they germinate into active bacteria and start producing toxin. This is why you cannot use a boiling water bath canner for low-acid foods like chicken, beef, vegetables, or beans. The boiling water canner cannot get hot enough to destroy those spores. Period. That's not opinion. That's biology. To destroy Clostridium botulinum spores, you need 240 degrees Fahrenheit. At sea level, water boils at 212. You cannot get water above its boiling point at normal atmospheric pressure. To reach 240 degrees, you have to raise the pressure. A pressure canner does exactly that. By trapping steam inside a sealed vessel and allowing pressure to build, the canner raises the boiling point of water above 212. At 10 pounds per square inch of pressure, water boils at approximately 240 degrees Fahrenheit. That temperature, sustained for the correct amount of time, destroys Clostridium botulinum spores. Not just the active bacteria, the spores. The USDA has been testing and validating pressure canning times and temperatures for over 100 years. The Ball Blue Book, which is the standard home canning reference, has published tested recipes for chicken since the 1940s. Opal's method in 1958 was already based on validated science. She didn't invent it. She followed what had been proven to work. That's why the jar was safe. She processed it correctly, at the right pressure, for the right amount of time, and the seal held for 67 years. I want to talk about the jar itself for a minute. Glass mason jars are made from borosilicate glass or soda lime glass, depending on the manufacturer and era. Both types are chemically inert for food storage purposes. Glass does not react with the food inside. It doesn't leach. It doesn't corrode. Metal cans can react with acidic foods over time, which is why commercial canned goods have a liner on the inside of the can. Glass doesn't need a liner. You can store acid, you can store alkaline foods, and the glass is not going to change what's in it. This is one of the reasons properly sealed mason jars maintain food quality better than metal cans over very long periods. Opal's jar was a wide-mouth quart jar. The glass was slightly green-tinted, which is common in older American glassware from that era. It didn't affect anything. The jar was intact. Intact glass is the first condition of long-term safe storage. Now let's talk about the lid system. Modern mason jar lids are two-piece. You have a flat metal disc with a rubber gasket on the underside, and you have a screw band that holds it in place during processing. Opal's jar used a zinc screw lid with a separate rubber gasket ring, the older system that was standard before modern two-piece lids became universal. The principle is the same. During processing, the jar heats. The food expands slightly and air is pushed out from under the lid. As the jar cools, the contents contract. This creates a lower pressure inside the jar than outside. That pressure differential pulls the lid down tight against the rim. On modern lids, you see the center dome flex downward during cooling and stay down. That's the vacuum lock. On the old rubber gasket lids, the gasket is compressed against the jar rim by the same vacuum force. When the vacuum fails, the seal fails. You press down on the center of a modern lid and it pops up and down. That means no vacuum. Air got in at some point. Maybe during cooling if the jar wasn't handled correctly. Maybe later if the lid was defective. Whatever the cause, no vacuum means the contents have been exposed to air. Air means potential for contamination. You throw out any jar with a failed seal. You never taste test it first to see if it's okay. You throw it out. Headspace is the gap between the surface of the food and the underside of the lid. This is not a trivial detail. When a full jar is pressure processed, the food expands from heat. If there's not enough headspace, the food pushes against the lid and can prevent a clean seal. If there's too much headspace, there's more air in the jar that has to be evacuated during cooling, which makes it harder to form a strong vacuum. For raw packed chicken in a quart jar, USDA guidelines call for 1 inch of headspace. That specification has been tested. It's not approximate. It's the measured amount that allows for correct thermal expansion and vacuum formation. Opal measured her headspace with a ruler. I know this because I watched her can in the 1990s when Earl and I first got married. She had a wooden ruler she kept in a kitchen drawer next to the can opener and the jar lifter. Every single jar. She didn't estimate, she measured. That attention to the small thing is part of why the jar from 1958 was still sealed 67 years later. Let me talk about low acid versus high acid food. This distinction controls everything about which processing method is safe for which foods. Acidity is measured in pH. Lower pH means more acidic. High acid foods, tomatoes, pickles made with sufficient vinegar, citrus fruits, have a pH of 4.6 or below. At that level of acidity, Clostridium botulinum cannot grow. It can't produce toxin. The acidic environment inhibits it. This is why boiling water bath canning is safe for those foods. The acidity does part of the preservation work for you. You just need enough heat to destroy mold, yeast, and the active forms of any bacteria present. 212 degrees achieves that for high acid foods. Chicken is a low acid food. Its pH is well above 4.6. There is nothing in chicken that inhibits Clostridium botulinum. You must use a pressure canner. There is no alternative. No amount of added salt, no technique, no modern method changes this fact. The only way to safely home can chicken is in a pressure canner at the correct pressure for the correct time. This is not optional guidance. This is the difference between a jar of chicken that's safe to eat and a jar that can cause serious illness or death. I tell people this often and sometimes they push back. They say their grandmother used a boiling water bath for chicken and nobody ever got sick. Maybe that's true. Maybe they were lucky. Maybe the jars were consumed quickly enough that toxin never built up. Maybe conditions weren't right for spore germination. But luck is not a method. The fact that someone got away with something does not make it safe. Opal pressure canned her chicken because the science said to pressure can it, and that science was correct. The USDA's position on the shelf life of properly pressure canned food is interesting, and most people don't know it. The official guidance says that properly canned food retains its best quality for 1 to 2 years. After that, quality declines. Flavor fades. Texture softens. Color may change. But safety doesn't follow the same timeline as quality. The USDA's actual documented position is that properly pressure canned food is safe indefinitely if the seal remains intact and the jar has been stored properly. Quality degrades before safety does. That's the actual science. We saw this with Opal's jar. The chicken was soft. The flavor was mild, almost neutral. The color was pale, even for canned chicken. Those are quality changes. Over 67 years, that's expected. But it was safe. The seal was intact. The vacuum held. The processing was done correctly at the time of canning. Safety was not in question. Now I want to walk through the inspection process we used because this is something everyone should know if they're working with old jars. Whether it's from your own pantry or a jar you inherited or found somewhere, the inspection is the same. The first step is the lid check. Press the center of the lid firmly. If it moves, if it flexes up and down, the seal is broken. Do not open it. Throw it away. If it is solid and doesn't flex, the vacuum is intact. That's your first indication of safety. The second step is visual inspection of the jar. Look at the rim where the lid meets the glass. There should be no residue, no dried foam, no discoloration suggesting something leaked or bubbled out during storage. Look at the lid for rust, for warping, for any sign of bulging. A bulging lid is a serious danger sign. It means gas has been produced inside the jar. That gas production means something was living and metabolizing in there. Throw out any jar with a bulging lid without opening it. The third step is smell. When you break the seal, and I mean the moment the seal releases, before the lid is fully removed, put your nose near the rim and take a small, careful smell. Off odors are a warning sign. Sour, fermented smells, rotten smells, anything that doesn't belong in what was canned in that jar, that's a sign of a problem. Properly canned chicken should smell faintly like cooked chicken. Mild, not strong, not off. The fourth step is texture and appearance once the jar is open. The food should look like what it is. The liquid should be clear or lightly cloudy in the case of some foods, but not murky or foamy. The meat should have normal color for canned meat, pale, not discolored. Mold, unusual colors, foam, and strange textures are all reasons to discard the contents. Opal's jar passed all 4 steps clearly. There was nothing ambiguous about it. If any step had been questionable, I would not have served it to my family. I want to say something about why Opal's approach matters more now than it did when she started. The store wants you to keep buying. That's how the store works. Every jar of commercial chicken you buy is a transaction. Every quart of home canned chicken on your shelf is one less transaction. Opal didn't frame it in those terms. She just didn't waste anything. She didn't let food rot. She didn't throw out a surplus harvest. She put it up, sealed it properly, and used it when she needed it. That's the whole philosophy. Waste nothing, want nothing. If you grow it or you get a good price on it, you put it up correctly and it works for you for years. The chicken in that 1958 jar was probably from Opal's own flock. In the 1950s in rural Kentucky, you didn't buy your chicken from a store very often. You raised it. When you butchered, you dealt with a lot of chicken at once. You ate some fresh, you shared some with neighbors, and you put the rest up. Pressure canning was the method because it was safe and it worked, and the equipment wasn't expensive. A good pressure canner from that era was built to last, and many of them did last for decades. Opal still has the pressure canner she used in 1958. It's a Presto 16 quart. The rubber gasket has been replaced twice since she got it. The gauge was tested and calibrated through the local extension office. She still uses it. When I asked her what she thought about us eating that chicken from the cellar, she looked at me like the question was strange. She said she put it up right. Of course it was fine. That's how she thinks. If you do the job correctly, you don't have to wonder about the outcome. She taught me the Ball Blue Book pressure canning method for chicken when I was first married. The method hasn't changed in any meaningful way since the 1950s. Raw pack or hot pack. 1 inch of headspace. Process quartz at 10 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes at altitudes up to 1,000 feet, adjusted upward for higher elevations. The adjustment for altitude matters because water boils at lower temperatures at higher elevations. If you're above 1,000 feet and you process at 10 pounds pressure, you're not reaching the same internal temperature as you would at sea level. The pressure must be increased to compensate. Most pressure canner instruction booklets and tested recipes include altitude adjustment tables. Use them. The 90-minute processing time for quarts isn't arbitrary. It was determined through thermal penetration testing. Scientists measured how long it takes for the center of a quart jar of chicken to reach 240 degrees Fahrenheit when processed in a pressure canner at 10 pounds pressure. They added a safety margin. That's the number in the recipe. It's not a guideline you can shorten because you're in a hurry. The center of that jar has to reach the target temperature and hold it long enough to destroy any spores present. Shortcutting the time is shortcutting the safety margin. One thing people ask me sometimes is whether modern chicken from the grocery store can be safely canned the same way as chicken you raised yourself. Yes, the method is the same. The biology of Clostridium botulinum doesn't change based on whether the chicken was raised on your land or in a commercial facility. The pressure, temperature, and time required are identical. What matters is that you process it correctly, not where the chicken came from. People also ask about jar reuse. You can reuse mason jars as many times as you want, as long as the glass is intact. No cracks, no chips at the rim, no scratches inside that could harbor bacteria. What you cannot safely reuse for pressure canning are commercial one-time use lids from store-bought food. Those lids are designed for single use. The sealing compound on the underside degrades after one heat processing cycle. New lids for every batch. You can reuse the screw bands if they're not rusted or warped, but lids are single use. That's not optional. I've been canning chicken for over 30 years now. My shelves have chicken that's 3 and 4 years old alongside jars from last fall. I rotate through them. I pull the older ones to the front when I add new jars. That rotation is important, not for safety, but for quality. A 2-year-old jar is still safe, but the flavor is better on the jar from last year. You use the older ones first. You keep the rotation going, and nothing sits so long that quality becomes a concern. Opal's jar was an exception. Not intentional long-term storage, just a jar that got pushed to the back and forgotten. The fact that it was still good after 67 years is a testament to the method, not to any special treatment. She canned it correctly, put it on the shelf, and the science did the rest. If you're thinking about starting to pressure can chicken, or you're just getting back into it after a break, start with a tested recipe from a reliable source. The USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning is free online. The Ball Blue Book is updated regularly and available widely. The National Center for Home Food Preservation website, nchfp.uga.edu, has tested recipes and the science behind them. Don't use untested recipes from blogs or social media for pressure-canned, low-acid foods. Use sources that tested the recipes with actual temperature and pressure measurements. That's the difference between a recipe that's been validated and a recipe someone made up that sounds reasonable but was never tested. I'm going to say that one more time because it matters. Low-acid pressure-canned foods. Use tested recipes from tested sources. The Ball Blue Book, the USDA, the NCHFP, not a random website, not something your neighbor told you. The testing exists and it's free to access. Use it. When Opal came over for dinner that evening, we had the chicken in a soup with vegetables from the root cellar. We told her what we'd found and what we'd eaten. She wasn't surprised. She said she remembered canning a lot of chicken that year. She'd had a good flock. She'd had more than she needed. She put it up because she didn't waste things. She thought it was all used up long ago. She ate the soup and said it was good. Then she went back to talking about her garden. That's Opal. That's the whole philosophy in one moment. She didn't can in 1958 so someone could make a video about it in 2025. She canned because she had something worth keeping, and she knew how to keep it. The science gave her the method. She followed the method. 67 years later, it was still good. If you've been canning for years and this confirmed what you already know, good, keep going. If you're newer to this and you've been hesitant about pressure canning, I hope this helps. The barrier is learning the method correctly. Once you know it, there's nothing scary about it. It's a process, like any other. You follow it correctly and it works. If you want to see more on pressure canning, chicken, beef, broth, vegetables, subscribe to this channel and let me know in the comments what you want covered next. We go deep on the science here, not just the steps. Understanding why the method works makes you a better canner and a more confident one. That's what Opal always said. Know why you're doing what you're doing. Then you'll never have to guess. We'll see you in the next one.